Hello you, it's me. Today we're going to talk about The Ghost Tree by Christina Henry. This is the first story of theirs I've even heard of that's an original story and not a retelling of another classical fairy tale or myth. The only other one of Henry's that I've read up to this point is Lost Boy, which is a Captain Hook origin story, which was fantastic, which is the reason I picked this up, because that book was so good. I'll link my review for that one at the end of this one, if you'd like to watch that. The story is set in a town called Smith's Hollow. It follows a 14-year-old character called Lauren, who lives with her brother and struggling mother, who is single, some months after the murder of her father. Lauren and her friend Miranda have always spent their afternoons exploring and playing in the woods that surround the town. And we pick up with them as their friendship is sort of wearing thin as they're both going through physical and social changes in their teenage years, drifting apart as they do so, standard teenage problems. Then two girls from out of town are found sliced to pieces on the edge of the woods, while a blocks away Lauren collapses to the ground with visions of their death from the perspective of the killer. So her, a new police officer in town, and a reporter from Chicago set to find out why, hours after the murders, no one can seem to remember any details about them. Why the reports of Lauren's dad's murder have been kept out of the press by the authorities. Somebody or something in the woods in Smith's Hollow is killing girls, getting away with it, and enjoying the protection of the town. I like this book. I will say you have this kind of horror story a lot, where you have a lot of characters that are working towards the same goal, and if they'd only communicate or all be on the same team, they'd get there a hell of a lot quicker. I wondered while I was reading this about why there's a large amount of thrillers recently, especially set in the 1980s. This one's set in 1985, because it references a song that came out a year before, and I looked that up. So I wondered if they were sort of capitalizing on the recent popularity of stuff like Stranger Things, or whether it was sort of a homage to the 80s golden age of horror. But I think there's a reason that's more likely than that. Yeah, it's nostalgic, it's also modern, but police procedure is crap still, and it hasn't been updated to where it is now. And neither is media in terms of international, instantaneous communication. And a lot of the stuff that happens in these horror thriller novels set in the 80s could no way happen today, because it would just be fixed like this. So this is the only setting that stories like this could actually work in. This is a young girl coming of age story, deals with stuff like body image, menstrual stuff, first stages of sexual attraction, differences in friends drifting apart because they're maturing at different ages. It's got the theme of previous peers suddenly measuring themselves against each other, grading their mental and social maturity by how far they've advanced through puberty, and the rifts between friends that this opens up. This is the second really female coming-of-age story in a horror thriller setting that I've read over the last couple of years, the other one being Grady Hendrix's My Best Friend's Exorcism, which I feel kind of did the social side of it a bit better. Even though it's about slightly older teens, I feel like it addressed stuff a bit better in that one. But this was still good. So things that I did like a lot about this book. I had a couple of theories the whole way through about who the perpetrator of the crimes or what the perpetrator of the crimes could be. There were a lot of clues dropped about people that seemed like they should be relevant. I thought the misdirection initially came across as clumsy, and I found myself trying to pick holes in it. But it was just the book leading me down false trails, so I think that was done really well. I like that the book is structured almost with an interlude that explains the mechanics of what's actually happening. Even though how this information is obtained felt a little bit like writer's convenience, it did feel like it gave the book structure. You have the events happening, an explanation and discovery, denial and more information, and then how do we fix this? I think it was one of the things that made the book feel very easy to read, if a bit cliche. And it is a little bit cliche in terms of horror tropes and themes, but I don't think that's necessarily a problem. A book can still be fun. But yeah, I like that the mechanics of what was going on in the town weren't left till right at the end to be explained to us in a big finale with a villain monologue, because that can really tick me off. There was some good relationship dynamics. The book is obviously Lauren-centric. Lauren's the main character. So the two main ones were Lauren and Miranda, and Lauren and her mum. I think the Lauren-Miranda relationship had a good base, even if Miranda did seem a little bit two-dimensional. with her whole mindset revolving around boys and social status. I probably can't judge though because I went to an all-boys school, so I'm like 50-50. Do these kind of teenagers exist, or is it just a meme? The relationship she had with her mum was well written. You totally sympathise with Lauren about how unreasonable her mum is being, and then it switches to the mum's perspective and she's thinking, oh my god, I'm doing these things which I feel like I have to do, but I'm still pushing my daughter away. You get the issue that they're at each other's throats because neither can understand the stress the other is under. Neither of them want to show weakness or back down, so it just becomes this constant conflict. So initially you have, what's the mum's problem with Lauren? Is it literally just because she's messy? And then you read on, you're like, nah, actually it's deeper than that. So that was well written. I did like that a lot. Oh, I also liked the whole way through how the character's internal speech was italicized. So it really felt more than thoughts, like private speech. And it flowed really naturally. And it did feel like thought. Sometimes you had these characters having internal conversations with themselves, trying to justify things. And it is how people think. So good job on that one. Things I didn't like or wasn't really sure about in this book. There might be some spoilers in this bit, so duck out if you don't want spoilers. They won't be major, but there'll be a few. Okay. I wasn't sure how the curse worked in terms of girls dying. The curse is that one girl gets killed by the monster every year, and it says that the mayor draws a name from a lottery and chooses a girl to die. But then the girl just sleepwalks out of her house, and the mayor has nothing to do with it. Or is it that the mayor chooses somebody and then that person sleepwalks? I wasn't sure. And what happens if the mayor doesn't choose somebody? Have they ever tried just not killing someone? And if it was meant to be Lauren and all the trouble is being because her dad died in her place, can't you just choose Lauren the next year? One thing I'm not a fan of, and you know this if you watch my stuff by now, is that when you can remove a whole element from the story and the story is pretty much unchanged. It's okay if it's a story that's teaching you something and it's going to be readapted for a new audience, but you could take the supernatural element out of this completely and it would still be a totally functioning thriller. The magic side of things in this book doesn't lend anything to the narrative at all, really. It's marketed as supernatural horror, or was marketed to me as supernatural horror, but it really is a supernatural thriller. And the only horror element in this whole book is that there is a lot of gore. I get that a 14-year-old having a crush on an 18-year-old is pretty normal, but that's a big age gap. And it's the fact that the feelings are reciprocated by the older guy who is a man for this 14-year-old who is still a child was a bit weird to me. I don't know how it is everywhere else, but here that would be considered dodgy. Maybe it's just how it was in 1985. No one would bat an eyelid at that kind of thing. But yeah, reading that was kind of weird. When you're both young teens, even 1 year is a big age gap. And it emphasises the age gap between Lauren and Miranda, who are months apart in age. So I don't know. Just felt a bit off. Didn't like that. Another thing was that there was a lot of reference to the killer, the monster, arranging the bodies of the victims with the heads in the middle facing away from each other and the limbs and organs in big elaborate circles, and I felt like that would have some kind of significance, but it didn't. It was nothing. It was just a thing. I'm going to talk about the very end here, as in the last pages, so back away, you have been warned. In the last couple of pages, she's waiting for Jake to wake up in hospital, desperately trying everything she can to make him wake up, saying everything she can to get his attention. And then she hears the voice of Miranda say, "Meet me at the old ghost tree." And at this point, Miranda's dead. And then suddenly, Jake's eyes snap open. I was like, what? Did Miranda do that? But saying all that, saying those things that annoyed me, this book was still fun. I still liked this book. I still think Christina Henry's a good writer. It was a really fun book to read. It was so quick, the chapters are very short, and the pace does accelerate towards the end of the book. You could very well put this book in YA, even though it does tackle some quite adult topics. But I guess a lot of YA does. Christina Henry does have a very accessible writing style, and this book probably could be a very good gateway book for people that read a lot of YA but haven't read any standard genre horror. So that's it. I'm going to give this book 3 stars out of 5. Thanks for watching my review. If you've read this book, Let me know what you think of it down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Content warnings down below as well. Follow me on Twitter. I'll drop a link in the description, and I'll see you soon. Bye!